So a lot of people look at your work as kind of the first major uh, stance or response against Skinner's behaviorism and other static and reductive forms of learning. And in the early part of the 20th century, the Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky played a similar role in post-Bolshevik Russia, where he was challenging Pavlovian behaviorism, as well as dogmatist tendencies emerging from that revolution. How do you compare to his work, and especially historically, and in terms of the intellectual contributions? And if you can comment on maybe his notion of inner speech, but as fundamentally dialogic, and how does that and social? How does that compare to your perspective?
Well, Vygotsky did very important work in forging new paths in the study of psychology, breaking from the rather narrow Pavlovian conceptions, which incidentally Pavlov himself did not regard as encompassing anything like human capacities. He was not misled about that. But Vygotsky did carry out exciting, useful, innovative work. He was one of the first people and almost only people to try to study inner speech. We now know a good deal more about it. Turns out that inner speech is not inner, it's outer. Inner speech, when you're talking, almost all of every moment of our lives, almost every person is doing something that is like talking to ourselves. But if you look carefully at what's there, it's not what's going on in your mind when you produce sentences. It's what is articulated in the externalization of language. So, for example, you try an experiment. If you read something out loud and read it silently, when you read it out loud, it takes much longer. And there's a lesson there. The time it takes to articulate, the time and energy, is far greater than the time it takes for the mental acts of producing and comprehending expressions in your mind, vastly greater. Now, if you think of any incident that you're involved in, walk into a room, see a friend of yours sitting there, you remember you want to tell him something, so you're going to walk over to him, but then you notice that he's talking to somebody else who'll be insulted if you just start a conversation with him, so you decide I'll say something else, and so on. All of this happens in an instant. You can't even measure how fast it is. What goes on in your mind is maybe you get a fragment of a word here and there. When you reflect on it, you could turn it into sentences, but that's not what's happening. What's happening in the mind is very rapid, far beyond the level of articulation. And what we call inner speech is simply outer. You didn't bother to produce the articulation. And if you look closely, there's no time to go into it. The structure and the nature of the expressions in what's called inner speech are really external. They're different from what we can show are the expressions that underlie them in the mental processes that create linguistic articulation of thoughts. So inner speech is really and to say that it's dialogic can't be true, because almost all of it is internal. I mean, 99% of your language use is just to yourself, thinking about things, and you're not introspecting. into what your mind is actually doing. You're seeing little bits and fragments of it that reach consciousness. But the interesting processes are internal, inaccessible to introspection. We have to study them the way you study the communication of bees or anything else. We study them from the outside, try to learn what they are. We can't introspect.